My name is Laura. I am 38 years old, and I live in Pasadena, California, in a beige rental with a dying crepe myrtle out front. I work as a senior escrow coordinator for a title company, which means I spend my days making sure other people sign the right papers before they ruin their lives. The irony is that I did not catch the papers that were ruining mine. On the Friday before Labor Day, I walked into our kitchen at 6:45 in the morning and found my husband, Daniel, already dressed in a navy suit he only wore for big meetings. He was leaning on the counter, scrolling his phone, smiling like a man with no secrets. Our daughter, Lily, was at the table, stirring cereal into mush, half asleep before school. My son, Noah, was upstairs, blasting music through the vent like the house was a drum. Daniel kissed my cheek and said, "We should talk tonight." His voice was casual, but his hand did not linger. His wedding band flashed once, like a warning light. I thought he was going to tell me he had been laid off again, or that his mother, Marlene, needed money for another emergency. Marlene always had an emergency. A leak, a surgery, a loan shark of a neighbor. Daniel always had a soft spot for her, and I always had a spreadsheet. I poured coffee and checked my email. There was a message from the county clerk with a subject line that made my stomach tighten. Notice of filing. At first, I assumed it was another routine alert for work, the kind I got when a lien showed up on a property we were closing. Then I saw our address, not a client, not a stranger. Mine. I opened the attachment with the same calm I used at my desk, because that is what I do. I read the first page. My name was there, typed neatly, followed by a signature that looked like mine if you squinted and wanted to believe in fairy tales. Beneath it was a transfer of interest in a small business Daniel had started in our garage. The one I had quietly funded with my overtime and my bonus checks. 51%. Gone. Assigned to a holding company I had never heard of. My coffee tasted like pennies. My hands stayed steady anyway, because I had learned the hard way that panic is a luxury. Lily asked if I could braid her hair. I smiled, walked behind her, and started weaving the strands while my heart kicked against my ribs. Over her shoulder, I looked at Daniel. He was still smiling at his phone. He did not look up once. That was when my phone buzzed with a text from Marlene. "Thank you for helping Daniel. Family should stick together." My skin went cold. I finished the braid, tied it, and realized tonight was not a talk. It was an ambush. I did not confront Daniel that morning. I packed lunches. I signed permission slips. I drove Lily to school and listened to her talk about a spelling quiz while my mind replayed the county filing over and over like a security tape. I told myself there had to be an explanation, something technical, something boring. People do not usually steal from their own wives, not after 14 years, not after shared mortgages and shared grief and shared children. That kind of betrayal belongs in movies, not in a beige kitchen in Plano. When I got to work, I did what I always did when something felt wrong. I opened spreadsheets. I pulled bank statements. I cross-checked dates. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Daniel would laugh and explain everything tonight, that Marlene's text was just her usual guilt-soaked gratitude. I told myself a lot of things that morning. None of them were true. Daniel had always been good at sounding reasonable. That was his talent. When his first startup failed, he said the market was unfair. When the second one failed, he said he needed more time. When the credit cards started stacking up, he said debt was a tool if you used it correctly. When I asked questions, he would smile and say I worried too much, that my job made me suspicious by nature. He said I saw risks everywhere because it was literally my profession. I believed him. I believed him because it was easier than admitting I was funding a man who had never learned to stop reaching. That night, he cooked dinner. Pasta, garlic bread, a bottle of wine he claimed was for a client but opened anyway. The kids were unusually quiet, sensing the tension the way animals sense weather. Marlene was already there when I came home, sitting at the table like she belonged there, hands folded, eyes sharp. Daniel cleared his throat and said, "Evelyn, we need to talk." He explained it slowly, like he was speaking to someone fragile. He said the business needed restructuring. He said outside investors required a clean ownership setup. He said it was temporary. He said my name being removed was a formality, not a loss. He said everything would still benefit the family. He said family a lot. Marlene nodded along, adding little comments about trust and sacrifice and how marriages succeed when wives support their husbands' visions. She said I had always been good with money, better than Daniel, and that this was just me using my strength to lift him up again. She said again, like it had happened before. Maybe it had. I asked one question. I asked who owned the holding company. Daniel hesitated for half a second too long. Then he said it was a friend, an old colleague, someone with resources, someone I did not need to worry about. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not anger, not sadness, distance. I felt myself step back emotionally, the way I do when a deal starts to smell wrong. I nodded. I said I understood. I said we would talk more later. I kissed the kids goodnight and went upstairs while Marlene stayed behind, her voice drifting up through the floor vents, low and satisfied. Over the next few days, Daniel acted lighter, relieved. He started making plans again, talking about growth and expansion and how things were finally turning around. He stopped asking me before moving money. He stopped explaining. He assumed compliance, like it had been signed into place. At work, I pulled the public records again. I followed the trail the way I would for a client, without emotion. The holding company was registered to a woman named Claire Whitman, 32 years old, marketing background, same last name as Daniel's new phone password, the one he had changed 3 months earlier. Claire owned the majority stake. Claire had signing authority. Claire was the real owner of the business I had kept alive with my paycheck. I did not scream. I did not cry. I sat in my car during lunch and stared at the steering wheel until my hands stopped shaking. I thought about the nights I worked late so Daniel could chase ideas. I thought about the bonuses I redirected without telling him so his accounts would not overdraft. I thought about Marlene's emergencies, how they always seemed to coincide with my tax refunds. That evening, Marlene called me sweet. She thanked me for being understanding. She said I was the kind of woman men were lucky to have, as long as they did not feel controlled by her. She laughed when she said it, like it was a joke. I realized then that this was not a misunderstanding. It was a plan. And I had been cast in the role of silent sponsor, expected to smile while my life was rearranged without consent. I went to bed next to Daniel and stared at the ceiling, listening to his breathing. I did not touch him. I did not wake him. I did not say a word. I was done asking for honesty from people who benefited from my silence. I did not confront Daniel after I found Claire Whitman's name. I did not slam doors or throw accusations. I did not demand explanations. I did something quieter, something far more dangerous to people like him. I started documenting. The next morning, after the kids left for school, I logged into every account I had access to and downloaded everything. Statements, transaction histories, archived emails, old contracts. I forwarded copies to a private email address Daniel did not know existed. I labeled folders by month, by source, by pattern. Years of my professional life had trained me for moments exactly like this, even if I never expected to use those skills on my own marriage. Daniel noticed the shift before he understood it. He asked why I was being distant. He said I felt cold. He said he missed how supportive I used to be. I told him I was tired. That was true. I was tired of pretending confusion was kindness. Marlene, on the other hand, sensed danger immediately. She stopped thanking me and started testing me. She asked casual questions about money, about whether I had told anyone about the business changes. She reminded me how fragile Daniel was, how stress affected his health. She reminded me how important stability was for the children. Every word was a lever. Every sentence assumed guilt. I smiled and gave her nothing. At work, I scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney under the name Laura, client, not wife. Her office smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. She did not flinch when I laid everything out. She did not ask why I stayed. She asked where the money went. That question changed everything. We followed the trail together. payments routed through shell accounts, business expenses that doubled as personal gifts, rent paid on an apartment across town that Daniel claimed was a shared workspace, jewelry receipts, travel charges, meals for two in cities I had never visited. Claire Whitman was not just an investor. She was an exit strategy. The attorney explained my options calmly. Frau, marital asset dissipation, forged consent, grounds for immediate financial restraint. She explained the difference between suspicion and proof. I already had proof. That night, I lay in bed beside Daniel and listened to him talk about the future. He spoke in confident lines, like a man rehearsing success. He said the business would take off now, that the structure was clean. He said we would finally breathe again. He did not say my name once. I watched his face and saw it clearly for the first time. He was not cruel. He was entitled. He believed my labor was invisible, because it always had been. He believed love meant silence. The next week, I requested copies of the original documents Daniel claimed I signed. The signatures were mine, technically, but the timestamps were wrong. The metadata showed edits made after the fact. Someone had scanned my name and pasted it where it fit best. Someone assumed I would never look closely. I did. When I confronted Daniel about the forged signatures, I did not accuse him directly. I asked him to walk me through the process, step by step. He stumbled. He corrected himself. He blamed the filing service. He blamed clerical errors. He blamed everyone except the person who benefited most. I nodded and thanked him for explaining. That evening, I moved half of my remaining liquid assets into a protected account under my name alone. I did it legally. I did it quietly. I did it before anyone could stop me. I arranged automatic payments for the mortgage, the utilities, the children's expenses. I removed my contribution from Daniel's world and watched how quickly it began to wobble. Claire started calling him more often. Marlene started calling me less. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was loaded. Daniel began snapping over small things. He accused me of withholding affection, of sabotaging morale. He asked if there was someone else. I almost laughed at that one. Projection is always the loudest confession. The attorney filed the initial motions on a Tuesday morning while I was at my desk finalizing a closing for a couple buying their first home. I signed my name without hesitation. The irony was sharp enough to taste. By Wednesday afternoon, Daniel's accounts were flagged. Not frozen yet, but watched. Claire tried to transfer funds and hit a wall she did not expect. Marlene showed up unannounced that night, her face tight, her voice controlled. She asked what I had done. I told her I had stopped helping. She stared at me like I had spoken a foreign language. In her world, I existed as a resource, not a person. Removing myself was not just betrayal. It was rebellion. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone in the living room and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. It was not joy. It was not relief. It was clarity. I was no longer reacting. I was preparing, and the people who had built their lives on my silence had no idea how close they were to losing everything. The next morning, Daniel left early with that same navy suit and a little too much cologne. Like he was dressing for a life he had already started living without me. He told me he had a meeting downtown, something about a new funding partner, something about momentum. He kissed Lily on the forehead, ruffled Noah's hair, and looked at me like I was a piece of furniture he had grown used to. I smiled back like a woman who believed him. The truth was, I had already called my attorney, Melissa Grant, and told her I wanted to move from preparation to impact. She did not hype me up. She did not tell me I was brave. She asked one simple question. Where will he be when it hurts the most? Daniel had been bragging for weeks about a launch event for his company, a small showcase in a rented conference room at a co-working space in Dallas. He claimed it was for networking. He claimed it was for potential clients. He claimed it was just business. I knew what it really was. It was his victory lap. Melissa filed an emergency motion that morning based on the forged signatures and the documented transfers. She also filed for temporary orders to protect marital assets and establish custody parameters until a hearing. She warned me that the first hours mattered, because men like Daniel tended to move money when they sensed the floor shifting. By noon, the court had signed an order that made Daniel's world smaller in an instant. Not destroyed yet, not finished, but contained. My hands did not shake when Melissa emailed the stamped copies. I printed them at work, slid them into a plain folder, and left my office at 3:30. I did not tell anyone where I was going. I did not ask for permission from my own life. I drove to Dallas with the radio off. Every red light felt like a dare. My mind kept trying to replay old versions of Daniel, the one who held my hand when Noah was born, the one who cried when Lily took her first steps. My body refused to accept that the same man could also plan my financial disappearance with his mother and a woman named Claire. But reality does not care what my heart wants. When I arrived, the building lobby was full of people pretending to be important, men in blazers. Women with polished hair and tote bags that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Daniel was near the elevator, laughing too loudly, holding a plastic badge with his name on it like it was a crown. Claire stood beside him. I recognized her immediately, not because I had ever seen her in person, but because her name had been living in my files for days. She was smaller than I expected, younger, perfectly styled, like she had been built to look harmless. Her hand rested on Daniel's arm with the casual ownership of someone who believed she belonged there. Marlene was there too, standing slightly behind them, scanning the crowd with the alert satisfaction of a woman watching her investment pay off. When her eyes landed on me, her smile collapsed so fast it almost looked like a glitch. She stepped toward me and hissed my name like I was a stain. Evelyn. What are you doing here? I held the folder against my chest and kept my voice even. I came to hear Daniel talk about the company I helped build. Daniel's laugh died halfway. He took a step closer, eyes narrowing. Evelyn, this is not the time. You are going to embarrass yourself. Claire's gaze flicked over me, polite and cold. She smiled like she had practiced it in a mirror. Hi, I am Claire. You must be Daniel's wife. The way she said wife sounded like an outdated label. Marlene leaned in, her voice sharp enough to cut. We do not need drama today. Daniel is finally doing something meaningful. Do not ruin this. I looked at her and felt nothing warm. Not hate, not grief. Just the clean understanding that she would burn my life down and call it family if it kept her son comfortable. We rode the elevator together in a silence that tasted like metal. Daniel kept glancing at my folder, like he could will it into harmlessness. Claire stared at her phone, scrolling, bored. Marlene stared at me like I was a problem she intended to solve. In the conference room, Daniel took the front, like he owned the oxygen. A screen behind him displayed his company logo. The same logo I had paid a designer to create when he claimed he could not afford branding yet. I sat in the back row, calm, while he talked about innovation and transparency and trust. Trust. The word landed like a slap. Halfway through his pitch, a man in a plain suit stepped into the room and scanned the rows. Process server. I had coordinated it with Melissa. Timing mattered. Witnesses mattered. The server approached Daniel and handed him an envelope. Daniel blinked, confused, then opened it. His face went pale in layers, like color draining out of a painting. He tried to laugh. He tried to play it off. He stammered something about a misunderstanding. Then he saw the stamped order. He saw the motion for fraud. He saw the temporary financial restraints. He looked at me like I had pulled a weapon. Claire leaned over, whispering urgently, trying to read over his shoulder. Her polished expression cracked. Marlene surged forward, reaching for the papers like she could snatch reality back into her hands. Daniel raised his voice, too loud, too desperate. Evelyn, what is this? What did you do? I stood up slowly. Every eye turned toward me. The room did not feel hostile. It felt curious. People love a success story until they smell the rot underneath it. I walked down the aisle and stopped a few feet from Daniel. I did not yell. I did not insult him. I opened my folder and placed copies on the podium, right beside his laptop, like I was adding a missing slide to his presentation. I said, I did not do anything to you. I stopped you from doing it to me. Daniel's throat bobbed. He glanced around, searching for allies. Claire was frozen. Marlene's mouth opened, ready to attack, but no sound came out at first. I continued, still steady. I have proof that my signature was forged on county filings. I have proof that marital funds were used to pay for an apartment and gifts for Claire Whitman. I have proof that you transferred majority ownership of a shared asset into a holding company under her control without informed consent. A man in the front row shifted uncomfortably. A woman near the aisle raised her eyebrows. I watched Daniel realize, in real time, that he was not the smartest person in the room anymore. Claire finally spoke, voice tight. This is ridiculous. Daniel told me everything was clean. I turned to her. You believed a man who lied to his wife for months. That is a choice. Marlene snapped back to life. She lunged toward me, pointing a trembling finger. You are vindictive. You are trying to destroy my son because you cannot stand to see him succeed. I looked at her and let the silence stretch. Then I said, your son did not succeed. He stole it. There is a difference. Daniel tried again, softer now, pleading. Evelyn, we can talk. We can fix this. Think about the kids. I felt my chest tighten, not with sympathy, but with the audacity of it. He had thought about the kids when he took money from their home. He had thought about the kids when he planned to move his life into someone else's apartment. He only remembered them when the consequences arrived. I nodded once. I am thinking about the kids. That is why you will communicate through attorneys from now on. The room was dead quiet. Daniel's launch event had become his public autopsy. He stared at the papers, then at me, like he had never truly seen me until this moment. And in that look, I understood something sharp and final. He did not regret what he did. He regretted that I noticed. As I walked out, I heard Marlene start to cry, loud and theatrical, telling anyone who would listen that I was cruel. Claire whispered angrily into her phone. Daniel did not follow me. He could not with everyone watching. Not with the truth sitting on his podium like a judge. Outside, the air felt lighter, not because I was free, not yet, but because the war was no longer hidden, and now Daniel knew I was willing to fight where it counted. I am Evelyn Carter, and when the courthouse doors closed behind me, the noise finally stopped. Not the shouting, not the cameras, but the noise inside my chest. The verdict did not feel like victory. It felt like gravity returning, the quiet certainty that lies stop floating when the air runs out. Daniel did not look back. He walked beside his attorney, shoulders stiff, already calculating exits and timelines, already rehearsing apologies meant for boardrooms instead of kitchens. Claire cried, but her tears were neat, careful, designed to be remembered kindly. Marlene sat frozen, hands folded, the face of a woman who believed reputation could still argue on her behalf. None of them said my name. They no longer needed to. The record had said it for them. In the weeks that followed, consequences arrived without drama. Daniel resigned and settled, trading silence for solvency. Claire moved to another city and called it a reset. Marlene stopped hosting dinners and started writing letters to editors that were never printed. No one went to prison. No one was ruined. That is how real endings often look, unspectacular and irreversible. I went back to work. I paid my bills on time. I slept without checking my phone. The ordinary acts felt radical after years of living inside another person's story. I learned that peace is not loud. It does not trend. It does not ask permission. People asked if I felt satisfied. I told them the truth. Satisfaction is a spark. What I wanted was heat. I wanted a life warm enough to stand in without flinching. I wanted my name to feel like mine again. Some nights I replay moments, searching for alternate paths, softer words, earlier exits. Then I remember that silence would have cost me more than speaking ever did. I remember the weight of evidence in my hands and the way truth steadied my voice. I remember choosing myself without asking to be chosen. I did not forgive them. I released them. Forgiveness suggests a gift. Release is a boundary. It means their future is no longer a room I have to clean. Now my mornings are simple. Coffee by the window, A walk through streets that do not know my past. Work that asks me to build instead of defend. Friends who listen without measuring. I am not healed in a cinematic way. I am healed in a practical one. If you are waiting for a grand moral, here it is, small and sharp. Justice is not a thunderclap. It is paperwork and patience and the refusal to doubt your own memory. It is the courage to be boring after surviving chaos. I am Evelyn. I am 32. I live where my choices lead. And when I tell my story now, I stop exactly where I choose. This ending is not an escape but a claim, a steady hand on the door, opening it myself, without witnesses, without fear, and choosing tomorrow with clarity earned silence.